Hi, I'm Sally Coddington, a Principal Consultant with Disability Services Consulting, and welcome to the first of 3 short videos that we're bringing to you to help you, Tasmania, to transition to the NDIS ILC, which is Information, Linkages and Capacity Building. So NDIS has meant really big changes, not just for individuals and their families, but it's also meant really big changes for organisations as well. Really big changes in the way that organisations provide services, really big changes in the way that organisations determine what kinds of services and supports they're going to provide, and also really big changes when it comes to funding. So organisations that have relied on state and federal funding in the past to fund their services are going to find some changes as some of those funding sources and streams will be rolled into the NDIS. And especially in the case of organisations that provide services such as information and advice and community building. And they're going to find that they actually now have to participate in an annual competitive tender process, which is called Information, Linkages and Capacity Building, or ILC for short. And that's really what these 3 videos are about introducing you to some of the key concepts of the ILC and helping you to transition to the ILC as an opportunity for funding the fantastic services that you provide. So ILC is really key to the guiding principles of the NDIS, and specifically with regards to the emphasis that people with disability have the right and should be supported to live ordinary lives alongside all Australians, that they should have equal access to community services and civic life, and that they should have the skills and the confidence that they need to be able to participate. And what that really requires, really the nuts and bolts of it, is that it requires that we have inclusive communities right across Australia. And the ILC isn't about individual funding. It's really about building inclusive communities right across Australia. And I think it actually has the greatest and most profound opportunity for social change in Australia. So ILC is really exciting. There are 2 parts to ILC grants. There are jurisdictional grants and there are national grants. And organisations in Tassie have access to both, jurisdictional and national. And all up, the NDIA is going to fund up to $134 million right across Australia through our NDIS rollout. ILC funding is intended to build inclusive communities. So it's not just for people who have an NDIS plan, an individual NDIS plan. And extraordinarily, last time I looked, there was about 4.3 million Australians with a disability, and only about 11% will actually get access to an individual NDIS plan. So that means 89% of Australians with a disability won't actually get an individual NDIS plan. That's a lot of people, also when you consider their friends and their family, that's a lot of people who really benefit from inclusive communities. So what isn't the ILC designed to do? It's not designed to provide services that are the responsibility of mainstream government, such as education, transport, health or justice. It's not designed to fill gaps, and it's also not designed to duplicate the work of local area coordinators. The ILC framework is complex, and there's a few concepts that you're going to have to get your head around if you're going to put in a successful ILC application. And most simply, those are activity areas, focus areas, and outcomes. There are 4 activity areas, and they are community awareness and capacity building, mainstream capacity building, individual capacity building, and information, linkages and referrals. There are 5 focus areas. They are specialist or expert delivery, cohort-focused delivery, multi-regional supports, remote and rural solutions, and delivery by people with disability for people with disability. And a number of ILC outcomes, such as people with disability are connected and have the information they need to make decisions. People with disability have the skills and confidence to participate and contribute to the community and protect their rights. People with disability use and benefit from the same mainstream services as everyone else. People with disability participate in and benefit from the same community activities as everyone else. And people with disability actively contribute to leading, shaping, and influencing their community. These are the concept for successful ILC grants, and over the coming weeks and months, Disability Services Consulting will not only be providing you with these brief videos, but we'll also be running some webinars and some workshops. So you'll definitely have some opportunity to get your questions answered and clarifications made. Information can also be found on the NDIS website, and there's some really great information there, and we'll talk a little bit about that in one of our subsequent videos. Although the ILC framework looks complex, it's so important. It really is about supporting people with disability to live an ordinary life alongside all other Australians and about creating inclusive communities. So if you can keep that objective in mind, then it can inspire you to put in some really fantastic ILC applications. There have already been some successful ILC rounds, and that's really great for Tasmania because it means that you can learn the lessons from those that have gone before you. Some of the hardest lessons that organisations have had to get their heads around are things like the differences between activity areas and the overlap between mainstream, community and NDIS responsibility, and then also what constitutes capacity building. So those are some of the challenges that organisations have had to clarify during the process. Successful ILC grants focus on innovation, are evidence-based, demonstrate how to measure outcomes as well as outputs, and have plans for long-term sustainability. And some of those successful applications include things like the development of an e-support services for people experiencing hearing loss. We've seen work with the mainstream real estate agents to develop capacity to be inclusive of people with disability, and also development of inclusive dance programs for kids with disability. The NDIS has loads of information about successful grant winners on their website, but for now, I want to hear directly from an ILC grant winner. So I'd like to introduce Jolie from the City of Greater Bendigo, who were successful ILC applicants. So hi, Jolie.
Hi.
So tell us a little bit about the project that was successful.
Yeah, sure. So our project is called Inclusive Towns. It sort of builds on what was historically good access is good business. And we employ 7 people with a disability at this stage in this stage of the project, where we go out to local businesses in townships across 3 local government areas and work with businesses to increase their inclusivity of people with a disability. So it's really important. The project's more than built environment access. We do touch on that. We do talk about that, but it's actually also focused on inclusive communication and disability awareness, and also employment of people with a disability within those small businesses where we all know that people with a disability live and be a part of and belong to that community. And the best way to do that is through jobs.
Excellent. And I've seen that paper, the Good Business, Good Access is Good Business, and I'm all the way up in Newcastle, New South Wales. So what that means to me is that this project that you've developed is scalable, that something can actually be implemented in cities and towns right across Australia.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was one of the critical things, I guess, when it comes to our ILC grant application, was that fact that it is scalable. We are working on building a sustainable model that can be adopted nationally. So that's actually really exciting to know that we do have a project that we can package up and give to any other local government or organisation who may want to deliver it across the nation or even internationally. But I think it's really important perhaps to reiterate that at the core of our project is that people with a disability are the ones leading it, they are shaping it, they are the ones saying which direction we should take it in, what works in each community. Because, working with businesses, say here in the Bendigo CBD, we're a regional city with over 110,000 people, compared to working in, say, one of the other local government areas like Loddon Shire, where we go to a small town like Inglewood and they have a maximum of about, 15 businesses altogether in the whole town. So the approach we take is actually place-based as well. So
excellent. Good. Yeah. You must have done lots of preparation in order for your application to have been successful. Can you tell us a little bit about what you did to prepare?
Unfortunately, we weren't lucky enough because we applied for the first round of the National Readiness Grants. So we weren't lucky enough to have any workshops that we could go to or that we were aware of that we could go to. So, but we knew we had a good project. We had been piloting it for 12 months prior, and I think that's what put us in really good stead for a grant application. We had evidence that the outcomes we were trying to achieve were actually successful in the project. And I guess it was, making sure that we read the guidelines. We sat down and we met with partners. We had so many meetings with key stakeholders, so people with a disability themselves. We've got reference groups here that we engaged with. We engaged with local disability service providers, and because it was really important that we weren't stepping on anyone's toes with the grant application, and obviously also important to identify any collaborations where if people were doing something similar, we could bring them in as a partner, and that's where we ended up with this strong partnership across the 3 neighbouring councils. So we already do work with them in terms of other projects and programs we deliver, but it was a great opportunity for all 3 of us to go in on this grant application.
Excellent. So it sounds like you did a lot of work before you even put the application in, and I can imagine a lot of organisations would put an application in and save the work for later, whether or not they win, but it sounds like you actually invested quite a bit up front.
We did, yeah. So, and I think that's maybe like one of the biggest tips, and I think why we were successful is because there was that evidence of that it already was a tried approach. We were learning and continuing to adapt. I mean, our ILC grant application was only to take it after a 12-month pilot, was to take it to that next stage and test what had come out of our pilot's evaluation. So it's still in the development phase of an ongoing program as such, but we did have a bit of backing and I guess a fairly strong project to showcase and offer as something that the NDIS could really get behind.
Yeah. And so preparation-wise, is there anything that you would have done differently?
Yes, I probably would have started actually physically writing the grant application a lot sooner than we did. We were literally hitting submit as the last minute in the grant system was counting down. So that was a bit nerve-wracking. But that was probably because we probably didn't allow enough time for those conversations to be had with the stakeholders. There was a lot of toing and froing, and some stakeholders couldn't make it to certain meetings, but it was really important that we had those conversations before we just went straight into putting the grant application in. I would say start early, and if you've got, I think, again, I've said it before, but run a pilot. It doesn't have to be 12 months like what we did, but even if you can get a smaller grant from somewhere else to help you, or just with existing resources, run it at 50% capacity just to test the environment, test that it's needed and is actually being supported by your community, and then that's where you can really get some good evidence into your grant application.
Cool. And so any last tips for organisations thinking of putting in an ILC proposal?
Yeah, I think if people aren't already starting to plan and deliver their projects with an outcomes focus, then I would say to start to change the way you do planning. I know, I've worked in the disability sector my whole career, that changing to an outcomes mindset was a little shift. We've been previously always reporting to government funding on how many people participated and that kind of thing. So that was quite difficult. So if people are even thinking about possibly applying, maybe not this year but next year, start to change your language to outcomes focused and read the ILC guidelines. They're actually probably, I would say, one of the easiest set of guidelines I've ever read and been able to follow. They do make a lot of sense. So learn the ILC outcomes, learn the activity areas, learn the focus areas of within the guidelines, and work to tailor your projects towards those.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you so much for helping us to prepare for the ILC in Tasmania.
You're very welcome. Good luck.
Thank you so much for joining me for the first of 3 really short videos about ILC and the transition in Tasmania. There's going to be tons of opportunity to have your questions answered over the next few weeks and months. Disability Services Consulting will be running some webinars and also some workshops down there in Tassie. So there's lots of opportunity. Don't freak out if you're finding it a bit overwhelming. Remember, it's really important work that we're doing with the ILC, giving access to an ordinary life for people with disability and creating inclusive communities. And of course, if you've got questions that you want answered right now, there's really great information available on the NDIS website. Thanks, and I look forward to seeing you next time.